Hi, everyone. Welcome to All the Forbidden Things. This is the show where we talk about all the things that we're not talking about, or ways that we're not talking about them, or people we're not talking about them with. Today, I am joined by Trey Piccoli. He is the son of a family friend. We've actually never met until today.
Yeah,
And Trey is Gen Z, I think you're still considered.
I am. I think I
Yes.
made it by a couple of years.
What is your age again
I'm
exactly?
19. I was born in
19.
2006.
Okay.
End of 2006.
Yeah. So yeah. And he's in college studying finance, but he's also studying world religion. We're having a conversation about. So he's a Christian Republican, a conservative Christian. I'm a liberal agnostic. And we're talking about what it's like to be a Gen Z conservative Christian man in his environment and kind of how he navigates that and what the political landscape is like today. And then I'll share a little bit about some of my experience being a conservative Christian in college and how that changed for me. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to fill into that little background or your story?
I think you got it pretty well, yeah.
Okay, great, great. All right, well, we'll start out with a get to know you question. So, what do you think is my favorite? We've got a candle going here. What's my favorite candle scent?
Vanilla is always a safe bet. I don't know if I would guess vanilla. What's your favorite season? Can you answer that?
Winter.
That does not help. I was hoping you were going to say fall or something.
No, actually, I'm trying to give you a clue. It is actually fall. Is my favorite season.
I feel like you would like a pumpkin kind
Yeah,
of
I do.
scent.
I do.
I don't
Yeah,
know what
that's a really good.
specifically.
No, so my favorite is like an evergreen, like Christmas candle.
Okay.
But then, yes, all of the pumpkin ranges are perfect. Very
Okay.
good answer.
What do you think mine is?
So you said vanilla is a safe bet, but I wonder if you like more of a beachy scent.
Not really.
No, damn it. Uh, same as me. All right, what is it?
I like a lemony scent. Lemon
Oh,
or lavender, or good lavender. I like.
all right. I would
Yeah.
never have gotten that.
I like my like fruity smells.
Yeah. No, a good lemon candle is awesome. I
Yeah.
rarely come across those. All right, so we're going to change to now a wildly intense question, which is you're going to go first with this question.
And this is you're going to be guessing on my behalf, right? Okay.
Correct.
So, what do you think is the hardest part of being a conservative Christian in college?
I think that it is the social interactions of people speaking very poorly, especially about Republicans. I think there's a little bit more tolerance for Christians, um, but maybe not so much when I was growing up. On some level, I feel like it's worse than when I was in college. And then on some level, I feel like it's better in terms of Christianity and religion
Okay.
and tolerance wise. I would think it's the politics that's the hardest. And I would think it was because most people just sort of like assume that you're going to be maybe a Democrat by default. Not sure what it's like in Florida, but and that they might like kind of call you out on it if they find that you're not, or that there's just that social pressure to like show up to the protest for the liberal thing that day or do the thing that everyone's doing and feeling kind of like awkward about it.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
I'd say it's pretty accurate. I think the hardest part is probably the politics because when you say like Republican, people are automatically like, "Oh, Nazi." That's not what I said at all.
Yeah.
So, or like when you don't show up to like the like ICE protests or No Kings protests, stuff like that. They're like, "Oh, so you don't support human rights?" Again, not what I said. It's I disagree with I disagree with a political topic. I don't disagree with people being people. And so I think it's that predisposition when I say I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I generally support Trump. The people are like, Christian, there's a decent amount of tolerance, but there's also a lot of they say no hate like Christian love, and people think that a Christian going up to them and sharing their beliefs is immediate hatred, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm going up to it because I care about you and I want what I believe what I think is correct. I want that to be what happens to you. So,
mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting that people miss about Christianity in terms of like doing ministry to other people and like speaking to them about your faith is that like you believe in a pretty significant cost if one is not a believer.
Yeah.
And so, of course, if you care about people, then you don't want them to experience that cost. And even likewise, you would want them to experience the joy and benefit that you get from your faith.
Yeah,
So,
the joy that I've experienced, I want others to share.
Yes.
And so I'm going to share it. I'm going to share what I believe with them so they can hopefully take in what I have and at least give it a try. See if it's something that they agree with or something they're, not for me. You never know until you try it,
Well, I have to say, like, similarly, like liberalism or even spiritual people are also proselytizing a lot of the time. Like, we, of course, want the other person to adopt whatever we think our values are, right? And it comes from a different place, I think, a lot of the time. Like, if I'm like a spiritual guru or I'm part of a spiritual program, there is a little bit of a built-in thing of like you never try to win someone over to something that they're not interested in. So there is that, but there is like a level of like, I want you to become a better person, or even self-help programs, right? Like it's I would say it's less pure in a sense, certainly on the political side, because it's more like, I don't want you to be my enemy. I don't want you to be a bad person anymore, right? And then there's that like shaming into it.
Yeah.
Whereas I do think it's worth pointing out that like, a Christian is sharing their faith with someone else really does come from a very pure place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a very vulnerable thing to do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like, you say something, like you see someone committing a sin, you like point that out and they're like, oh, so you hate me. No.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like Christianity gets a bad rap for that, whereas a lot of other religions can point out things that they disagree with and people are like, oh, okay, I'll look at that. And then a Christian says that and it's like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, that's really interesting, because my first instinct is like, yeah, I don't want you pointing out my sins. Like, you can tell me about Jesus, but I don't want you calling me out on anything that you value that I don't, or whatever. But then I have to recognize that on the other side, that happens all the time. So it's sort of like, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times liberals think of it as like, you've adopted some kind of like constrictive thing that doesn't or not liberals but non-Christians, that doesn't appeal to me, and so I feel like it so does not appeal, or I think of it as something that you've taken on, whereas for you it's like a default because it's a belief. So yeah, so then I'm kind of like, why would you push something on me that you've taken on that that we don't all have to adopt, but for you it's uncovering, yeah. All right, so I'm going to turn the question back on you. So I was a Republican Christian in 2007 was when I entered college. What do you think was the hardest thing for me?
I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about the political landscape in 2007. I was in diapers.
Yeah.
I know we've gotten a lot more divided over the past few years, but I still think there was probably an element of the modern day idea of if you disagree with somebody, then you hate them and they're a worthless person, and you can't like be friends with someone who disagrees with you. And I think that a lot of people view being a Democrat or being a liberal as like the default view. And I think you can get persecution when you go against like the common belief. And I think that pushes a lot of people away. They go to what might be easier because people don't persecute you as much. Which that's not at all me invalidating views, but I think there's a lot more liberals condemning Republicans like openly and calling them like slurs and names, whereas Republicans don't tend to do that as much. Generally, obviously there's exceptions to that, but I think you probably face some sort of persecution within the political environment, might have struggled to get involved with like a Christian community. It is very easy to fall away when you get to school if you don't find people that believe similar things as you and hold you accountable to what you believe. It's very easy to slip back into what's easy in the moment.
Mm. So it's really interesting because it makes me think about how there really is a difference today in the political environment. So the Republican Party was a very different, oh man, this is going to be embarrassing whether it was pre Tea Party or post. But the Republican Party was fairly different at that time. The Democrats were similar. And Obama was what, 2008? I remember I
I think
saw him
so.
speak when he was campaigning during college. So it was, there was not nearly as much division. It was much more like sort of values based
Okay.
and less of the opponent thing. What it was more so was like a cool factor. So, like, if you were a Christian or a conservative, it was more like an ick
Okay.
versus if you were it wasn't like a huge problem, but it was like the type of thing that it wasn't I was not maybe I did share it fairly openly with people initially. So I joined a Christian group on campus,
Which one was it?
the
Okay.
Navigators. Okay, do you have
We have
feelings about
navigate
that?
yeah. We have
Okay,
navigators at UF.
are you a fan or no?
I went to a couple things. It's just so small there. They
Okay,
don't have the budget or the manpower to really do anything.
yeah,
And so I went with the BCM because they have more power to like go places and do more fun things beyond just let's throw a football.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so ours was really cool. It was filled with all these because I went to NYU, so it was
Hmm.
all these like New York people who like dressed cool, and like there was a huge community. It was very active, and I got a lot of friends from there. But I remember like my freshman year friends were the first time that I had like ever even had like non-Christian friends as like over the age of, I don't know, 7 or
Oh wow.
something. Yeah. And so I remember there was like one guy who was Catholic, but he was a Democrat in our friend group. And he was gay. And I remember thinking, wow, you can be a gay Catholic? That's crazy. And then there was another guy who was also gay, but he was a Republican. And everyone in the group gave him a hard time for being a Republican. But it was almost like this playful, like, ew, Josh is a Republican,
Yeah,
or
just
like,
poking
you
fun at people.
Republican. Yeah. So it was definitely, I would say it was more like what you learned in college was so much more like it was the liberal arts of it all. It was the artistic side. It was the like philosophy, things like that, that
Hmm.
kind of like it was almost more of a cool factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think it's wildly different when I think about it today, what you're experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of that like playful anymore. I mean, I think within like close friend groups, like if one of my like buddies calls me like a libtard or something, that's kind of funny. Like we're just making
Mm-hmm,
fun of each other.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But if you go up to like a random person or people that you don't know well, you can't really joke about politics
Yeah.
because if you say one thing that someone disagrees with, then now it's a whole argument, and it's like we can have different opinions and not dislike each other.
Yeah, I mean, you're blacklisted forever. I feel like you
Exactly.
cannot be friends.
Yeah, and you can support 99 things, but the one thing, even if it's not significant, you don't
Mm.
100% agree on, can't talk to them. I'm like, why? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That kind of leads into the next question of losing friends.
Hmm.
So you had a question for me on that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you think that in college you lost friends or had like relationships end because of your beliefs?
So that would be, I'll answer that on your behalf. So did you um I think that you had what you just described in terms of you've had like people who don't want to be your friend.
Okay.
I wonder if there's been maybe one or two occasions, probably. I wouldn't think that it happens very often because I think people are trying to suss out what your politics are so early on as a filter. But there may have been one occasion in which you sort of got close with a classmate or something, and then like maybe they kind of found out some of your beliefs, or maybe you spoke to them about your faith or something, and then they responded negatively and pulled back. That would be my wild guess.
I wouldn't. It's not 100% right. It's not too far off. I don't usually get into like political conversation. I usually, if we're gonna talk politics, I wait for someone else to bring it up because I'll say what I have to believe. I have the evidence that backs it up in my mind that it's not just it feels right. But I know I'm not gonna base my friendship with somebody off of our political beliefs. We can be best friends, and I can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat. Okay, we disagree on what box to check off, but we can still agree and get along, go through life together. Um, I think that so, I haven't really lost many friends. I don't think there's been people who have disagreed with me, but I try not to like be a douchebag about the fact that I disagree with you. I'll get into a discussion and we can talk about our beliefs and why we believe that way. But I'm not going to say like, "Oh, I think you're wrong. It's stupid." I'm going to say
Mhm.
that's an interesting perspective. I don't necessarily agree, but that's interesting, and we can leave it at that. We can be friends and know like we're not going to talk about abortion. We're not going to talk about like immigration. We don't
Mhm.
agree, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends. Um, I don't think I've really lost many friendships because of politics. I think it's more the friendships I've lost have just been we've grown apart because we're at different stages in life, or I had to go to school, people stayed home, whatever. But I definitely see the potential for politics to do it.
Mhm.
It just doesn't really happen to me because I try to avoid talking about politics with people.
Two things come up when you're saying that, and one is I'm remembering now back to my days. Um, uh, I remember that we actually were very insular, especially when I was in high school, the environment that I was in, the school that I went to. But also, there was at that time like this sort of belief that you needed to separate. I'm interested to know if this still exists, but the other question is very important to me too. So, there was this belief at the time that like if you spent too much time around people who weren't Christians or engaging in worldly things or worldly behaviors, as they were considered, like that it rubs off on you, and then like that, or that there's something sort of wrong with it. Whereas I do sense in the Christians that I know, which I typically end up in the liberal camp more so anyway, these days that there's a lot more like, oh yeah, we curse here, or we don't worry about this thing or that thing. I mean, we did have that in our oh, we curse in this in this group, but there's like a little bit more of an openness to engage with people who are not Christians. There's a little bit less of that like sort of fear of the world.
Okay.
I hate to frame it like that in case your answer is that like, yes, you do feel that way. And I don't want to say fear of the world, but it for
Yeah, I
me,
know
it
what
was
you
fear of
mean.
the world. So I want to answer that at some point, but I'd also like to ask you, so you're talking about like being able to, and I was thinking it's almost like I find that conservative Christians are able to be able to be like, I'm going to be friends with you anyway,
Hmm.
more than I find liberals feel that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Um, Now I have a friend who would wildly disagree, but it depends on who you're interacting with, I guess. So why do you think that is? For me, as being a liberal, I can answer, sort of the closest reason. But why would you think that is?
Why do I think it's easy for Republicans to be
Yeah.
friends with liberals and liberals with Republicans? I think there's a lot of like victim mentality that's portrayed in social media and the news that I think they make it where liberals want to have that ideology and want to make things about themselves. Generally, obviously, it's not everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm listening.
and I think that people, when they hear that you disagree, they're like, "Oh, so you like I think that way? You think I'm inferior?" The people that they want to have that victim mentality for themselves, they want it to be about them. And I think that when if someone's trying to make themselves a victim, and I'm saying like I don't agree with like having an open border, and if I'm talking like a Mexican, and they were to say, "So you think I should just go back to my country and never be allowed in the U.S.?" I'm not gonna really want to associate with that person because like I'm not talking about you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're making this about yourself, and I have better things to do than talk to somebody who's just gonna try to make me feel bad about thinking the way that I think about anything in the world. And I think that I mean Republicans do that too, to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does, but I think you find that more commonly with liberals, especially younger, more immature liberals. So I think they just make things about themselves, and people that are interacting with them tend to be Republicans in this instance. Just don't really want to deal with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm like trying to wrap my head around that because I've never ever processed that thought before or really come across it. Um, I do think it's so funny because I think that Republicans are, my experience of them a lot of the time is that they're whiny about being picked on. And
Yeah,
that's like one of the only things I get from y'all.
yeah. There's a lot of
but
that.
but the victim mentality of like, I'm a woman, and so I'm always at the mercy of the patriarchy. So why would you want to make it worse for me, kind of thing. Like I can see how that would come off that way, how people actually act that way,
Mm-hmm.
many people. Um, I have a huge problem with that in general, and I'll speak to like maybe women more than anything because that's like the biggest sort of minority group that I belong to.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there is this attitude out there of like when we are constantly fighting a fight that may not even be necessary in a
Mm-hmm.
situation, instead of just showing up as larger than we were once perceived, we end up continuing to subjugate ourselves. So I see this a lot in like dating culture out there for women. I see it in the capture the red flag games. I see it in a lot of things. And I would need more time to sit here and come up with something intelligent to say about it. But I do see that that bothers me about my own, you know, group
Mm-hmm.
that has in the past experienced serious inequality and continues to in many areas, because I do feel like a lot of times some of modern feminism continues to reinforce the patriarchy through the um, framing of oneself as a victim of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's a very delicate thing because there's a lot of context involved in which there are still
Yeah.
real things going on. Um,
And you can't really say anything about it without it being wrong in some instances.
well, and then the thing is like if you were to come to me and try to convince me of that, I'd be like, F you, here are all the millions of reasons
Yeah.
that I'm still have had these problems. And so, because, and I think it's this feeling of liberals feel like you are going to take certain rights away or vote into a system that has historically um, created like serious inequalities and problems for people, losses of freedom or losses of safety or whatever, right? And it's not you specifically who's
Yeah.
doing it, but it's the perception that you're voting for something that has had very like active implications on the limitations or inequalities of my life. Even if you don't think of any kind of moral issue, there's also like just this is a patriarchal system, or this is a, it benefits big companies or whatever, and that has all these implications for people who are not. So I think like there's this feeling that your bite is worse than your bark, and our bark is worse than our bite. So it actually feels
Okay.
like there's a real threat involved. And it's almost like if you don't perceive there to be a threat, I'm like, well, I have to convince you that there's a threat so that I'm not unprotected. So it's an interesting thing, but but there's such a fine line there between
Mm-hmm.
someone being protective and someone acting like a victim. And I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think the majority of things that you'll see on social media are very victim mentality and
Yeah.
attitude. And so that makes sense. Um,
Yeah. And there's so much misinterpreting of what people are saying just for the sake of starting an argument. Like, I saw when the topic of like DEI was going around, people were like, oh, you want to bring back Jim Crow? What?
yeah,
No, that's not the same. That is not at all the same thing.
the hyperbole is brutal.
Or people saying like requiring a photo ID to vote is like a poll tax. That was a little bit closer than Jim Crow.
Mhm.
It's a little bit more related to the original topic, but
Mm.
we're misinterpreting things. We're
Yeah.
trying to make ourselves like they're going to make the poll tax thing. They're going to say, "Oh, well, you want minorities to not be able to vote." Again, not at all what I said,
Mhm,
but we're
mhm.
going to drastically misinterpret this thing to the point where I don't remember what that kind of argument is or what that logical fallacy is. It straw man? I'm not 100% where you misinterpret someone's argument so bad it's not even the original argument.
I don't think it's straw man, but I can't tell you what
You
it
know
is
what I'm
off the top of
thinking
my head.
of.
I know what you're talking about.
But there's so much of that, and it's like I think Republicans just get tired of it, and that's why a lot of moderates don't really voice their opinions anymore. Because I don't want to say, like, I support requiring ID to vote, because then someone's going to say, well, you want to bring back poll tax, you don't want minorities to vote, you don't want poor people to vote, and it's like, none of those three things are what I said, none of those three things are what I believe, but I don't want to get into that, so I just choose to stay quiet.
Gosh, that's so interesting because on that specific point, I feel like okay, so then this gets into a little bit of like people going after, I would say a lot of times Republicans, well, everybody calls each other stupid.
Yeah.
But the reason that we think y'all are stupid, no, is, and I don't, to be clear, but but I do feel like a lot of times, like the maybe media that a lot of Republicans consume, the attitudes that are out there are things that are involved where on the surface it looks fine. Like, and for me, and I won't get deep into that point, but for me, that's one of those things where there's an institutional cost. There's what I think is an underhanded agenda underneath it.
Yeah.
But the point in and of itself that you agree with, like I would say if you actually thought there was an underhanded agenda, you wouldn't support it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's this idea of like, I think a lot of times too, each side is like reading into this sort of conspiracy-ish thing of like, well, you're just trying to take our rights away. And what happens is that the person makes it about you. Whereas if something's really fishy going on there, then it's the policymakers or the people behind the scenes who have figured out how to write something in a way that's going to benefit them, right? But it's not like you're actively advocating for my worst nightmare about what could happen with that thing.
Yeah.
And I think that is, it's really interesting that people don't have sort of the intelligence caps on when they say those things to know that you're not signing on to this thing, actively. I would say that the compassion that I would extend is more that perhaps you don't know or aren't exposed to some of the information, which I know both sides think that about each other. So that's really interesting. All right, let's get into another subject. Let's talk about your studies. So you are studying, is it world religion?
I'm studying finance, and then I'm doing a minor in religion.
Is it like religion is the title, or is it world religion? Or okay, and
it's
talk
religion,
me through
like
what you're studying, and it's from a liberal arts perspective.
I think it's in the liberal arts college. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like a seminary thing, right?
No,
you're studying all the different religions out there and critical theories. Yeah. So we were gonna have me take a guess for you on is kind of what challenges come up, or how you approach
to my beliefs have come up.
Yeah. So I think that, oh gosh, that is just so personal. What a brutal question. Why did I come up with that?
I'm not going to get offended.
So I would say perhaps, and I don't think this is actually true of you based on the energy that I'm getting, but what I would think somebody in your position would be like the exposure to other faiths that shares some of the commonalities of what you think is unique about yours.
Okay.
But that, I believe that your analytical capabilities might be beyond that a little bit. Like, I think you probably thought about those things before, but maybe not, right? Like that always happens. Like, I think for me, when I've like been challenged, it's like, oh, I was taught, I'll answer this for myself. So when it happened, when I was challenged in my faith from a studies point of view, it was that I was taught a lot of things about other faiths and other people that when I encountered them were untrue, either about the complexity of their beliefs, the similarity to what we believed, or like even just their morality, right? Like I believed that people were almost all immoral if they were not Christian.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that I could at all justify that anymore after learning more about other
Yeah.
faiths and groups of people. So perhaps it's along those lines, but honestly, encountering similarities maybe.
I think, I mean, my studies so far have been limited. I've only taken 2 Christianity classes. I haven't gotten into other religions yet. The
Mm,
department has done a really bad job of offering other classes.
wow.
Um, I want to take global Islam. So my original intention of doing a religion minor was I wanted to learn more about other faiths because I wanted to use it from an evangelical perspective
Mm,
to I can have an intelligent discussion with a Muslim or a Hindu or X, Y, and Z religion if I understand what they believe.
yeah.
It's one of those things where if I think it's wrong, I want to understand why I think it's wrong so that I can present an argument against it. And
Mm,
I think that also touches on politics. You have to understand the other side to be able to have an intelligent discussion. If you just want to say why you're right, that's not going to do anything. If you don't know why they think what they think, you're not going to be able to relate to that person and have any sort of conversation with them. Um, and so going off that with my intention, I think the biggest challenge so far has been finding or having conversation with people in class about things that we disagree on. In the last unit, I took global Christianity this past semester, and the last unit we talked about was like homosexuality and the church's view on that. And there's a lot of people in my class that didn't view homosexuality as a sin, whereas I do. And it was challenging having discussions where I'm going to point out what I believe and what I think they're wrong about without getting them mad and where they don't want to listen to me anymore. So
mhm.
it's navigating a fine line of telling someone I don't think you're right while not making them upset and think that I'm personally attacking them.
I have a question on that, which
Okay.
is, so I understand desiring somebody to like come follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, but the pointing out of the sin on someone that you do not, that is not a Christian, because I've
Mhm.
heard this from other Christians of like, they'll monitor each other's kind of beliefs to make sure that like, hey, we're all doing the right thing here, right?
Yeah.
But for somebody that you would consider to be a lost soul, if
Mhm.
you will, what is the purpose of pointing out something that you feel like they're doing that's sinful when you know they don't even subscribe to that morality or they aren't God's child?
Mhm. So I found the idea of like when you evangelize someone, helping them understand what they're experiencing, what they're thinking, and then pointing out like, well, did you know the Bible actually says like that would happen as a result of this? And that makes people think, maybe there is some validity to this. Because someone who doesn't believe in the Bible, they're gonna pick it up and read it. For if they pick it up and read it, it's just gonna be stories to them. Um, but if you can make them understand how it has implications in their life, they're more likely to listen. And so I think that when I get into a conversation with somebody that is engaging in some sort of sin, if I ask them like how do they think that makes them feel and why do they think that is, I can usually tie that back into, well, did you know the Bible says that if you do X, Y will happen? And that makes them think, maybe there is some validity to this. Maybe I should check it out because it claims this is the problem. This is what I'm experiencing. Oh, here's the solution. Maybe I could try that. So
Mhm.
I view that as the goal. And that's why I don't want to personally attack people because I don't want them to, as soon as people get personally attacked, they go in defense mode and they're not listening to what I'm saying anymore. They're just
Mhm.
listening to like the argument so they can refute it. They're not thinking about it beyond us disagreeing. So I want to navigate it where I can help them understand what I'm thinking without making them feel like I think they're inferior because I don't. I can disagree with you and think you're doing something bad while still loving you as a person,
Mhm.
right? I still hang out with sinners.
Mhm.
I don't hate them. I don't agree with what they do though. So I'm going to try to guide them on the path that I think is right while making them not think that I hate them and I want them to suffer in their sin. If I see them suffering, I don't want that.
So when you're saying the path that you think is right, your end goal for them is for them to find Christ or reduce their suffering.
I think I mean, they would find Christ and that would that would
Yeah.
reduce their suffering.
Yeah. Um, so that's interesting because I think you probably come across the most pushback from about subjects of that people associate with identity.
Mhm.
So something like homosexuality, I
Yeah.
can't see that that's probably ever gone well for
No.
you because um, other than feeling persecuted for it, I don't think queer people have or internalizing something that they feel is negative feelings about it, I don't feel like they have a problem with it. I think it's experienced as a positive thing for the person, right?
Yeah.
The only negative to being queer is how people treat you. So, or what you were taught about yourself. So, so I can see that would be difficult. Certainly abortion would be difficult because
Mm-hmm.
it's a hot button issue. And then that ties back into womanhood and patriarchy
Yep.
and female rights. So, but I could see how if somebody was indulging in alcoholism and you were like, here's what God says about indulgences or substances or whatever, and that's why you're having these effects in your life, that would be somewhat effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's on the topic of like homosexuality and like people that are queer. I want to make a statement. I don't dislike homosexuals or queer people at all.
Oh, I believe
I
that 100%.
love
Yeah.
them as people. I don't agree with what they do and their lifestyle, but I still
Yes.
love them as people. I have nothing personally against them.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that you find with a lot of, I guess, LGBT queer people,
Mhm.
they might be happy with what they're doing, but I think there's still that element of self doubt and feeling like, is this right? And I've seen that online. A lot of people, when they don't have to put a face to their name or anything, will come out and be honest about like, I've been gay for 5 years, I've been lesbian for 10, whatever. I don't feel like this is right. There's always like this part inside me that feels like what I'm doing is wrong. And I'm trying to, when talking to them specifically, get to that part where even if they don't want to admit it to my face, they're going to go home and think about it a little bit. If I can plant the
Ooh,
seed, as what we call it, I think my job is done.
that is hard to hear because so I identify as bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
Um I would say I experience internalized homophobia. That's how I would
That's
call it.
interesting.
Um, I think that the feeling that you're describing is socially put upon. So I think it's an internalized persecution, if you will,
Okay.
where the belief since day one as a child through up to my adulthood until I left my faith would be that this was this abomination.
Mm-hmm.
To believe that about yourself or to have people believe that about you eventually settles in and
Okay.
you start to even I think sometimes in my life if I had thought that something was a sin and that it had a consequence, I started to almost manifest the consequence because I thought that's what happened next, or
Okay.
because I felt like that was the punishment that was due. And so I almost just like played out a script I was given. Even after I had left the faith, I was still playing out patterns that I feel were programmed through conversations like what you are having with people,
Mm-hmm.
right? I would be like, oh, I mean, you're the reason I feel that way, right?
Okay.
So it's an interesting, not you now
No,
and
yeah.
not me now, but that kind of like that somebody who has a belief that it's wrong would have reinforced for me the internalized belief I had. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And I think you'll probably find a lot of people who feel very self protective about not having a negative view of their experience again,
Mm-hmm.
right? Have you found anyone who is like, yes, I do believe you're right that this is wrong, and my doubts have like made it clear to me.
I haven't with homosexuality or
Yeah,
LGBT people yet.
yeah.
Um, I have with a few people that have talked to me about premarital sex. I've had them agree with what I've
Mm-hmm.
said and what
Mm-hmm.
the Bible has said. Um, it's just homosexuality and like abortion topics like that. It's so hard because of the political environment we're in, where if you don't fully support LGBTQ like events and rights and you don't fully support abortion, it means you hate everyone that agrees with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
so hard to get people to understand that where I'm coming from is not, I think you're wrong, I want you to change. It's, I love you and I think that there's a better path for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think if people understood that that's the Christian mindset, that we're coming at you because we love you and we think that what you're doing is wrong and it's hurting you, there'd be a lot less divide. But I don't think the world will allow that. I think there's
Yeah,
always going to be that divide.
and it goes back to the catch-22 that the very act of you doing that or reinforcing that through
Yeah.
legal means is what I believe is the main thing that's hurting me.
Exactly.
So that's where it gets really hard.
Yeah, and there's no perfect solution to
And
that.
and yeah, it's almost an unsolvable problem.
Mm-hmm. One side is going to be upset. If I don't say anything, I'm going to be upset I didn't say anything. If I do say something, you might be upset that I said something. So if we do end up talking, we might both be upset that it didn't go as it went.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that there's never going to be we're both 100% satisfied. That's just the nature of the issue.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means that we shouldn't pursue that.
Mm.
And I shouldn't not share my beliefs because I believe that what I believe is best for people. And so I want them to experience what I think is the best. And I would encourage other people to also share what they believe if they think that's what's best for everyone. We should want to help each other. We shouldn't all be divided because we disagree.
Do you think if you were to consider like that, if you say this thing about somebody's life, then it may ostracize them, and that would actually put you farther from the goal of introducing them to God's love?
I think there's the risk of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that touches on something completely unrelated. I want to be a business owner when I grow up. I want to be like an entrepreneur. I want to own my own thing. And that requires a large investment that might go wrong. And there's a lot of people that say, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if you fail? What if you lose all your money? But then no one talks about the other side. What if it works? What if you end up accomplishing your dreams and everything? And I think that can touch on that. People focus on well, what if it pushes them away? What if it makes them not want to consider it at all? What if it does work? What if they do start to consider Christ and Christianity? And I think that the risk of them possibly getting salvation is more important than the risk of them being offended and feeling ostracized at all. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's go to, why do you think I lost my faith when I was in college? And it might not be because of college.
Okay. Can you remind me what you studied again?
Oh, I studied like marketing and entertainment business.
Okay. I did not know you were bisexual before. You said that a few minutes ago. I would probably guess it. I'd probably guess that had a factor on it, and probably a lot of people that would talk to you and try to personally attack you for being bisexual instead of trying to take the more loving approach of pointing out what they believe is sin. I think that enough of that is going to make somebody turn away and not think that this faith they've had even their whole life it's not real because it says this thing that people are doing. It says this, people are doing that. Am I on the right track?
Well, it's interesting because I was so closeted. I actually would say even like I don't know, that's a little bit too personal, but I was not like actively dating women or even necessarily all that aware of my attraction. It became more apparent to me, not that it didn't exist before, but it was like more of an awakening later on after I lost my faith, because I didn't feel like there was the possibility to experience it. And that was all very subconscious.
No, we're talking after college for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or after, so I lost my faith after my freshman year in college. And there were, I guess, three things that I can like sort of mention or point to lightly. So one of the things on what you're talking about, I did actually feel that way about people who were gay and people who were Muslim secondarily, but that other gay people who I did not identify with at the time were, especially gay men, were so poorly treated and considered and thought of as like, you know, at the time, like this very sort of in that kind of culture, Christian culture that I was in, almost like this corrupt kind of person, right?
Yeah.
And so, and there was an ick factor and whatever. And then when I developed a relationship with that Catholic gay friend of mine, I was like, oh my God, he's like the nicest person I've ever met. In fact, the atheist that was in the group, the atheist Republican, and then the guy who was gay, they were so much more, they had this genuine generosity, kindness, and morality that when I was part of the Christian group, it seemed like everybody struggled to be a good person. It was like everybody was just filled with sin, lying, doing all these things. Like they felt like, or at least they were, maybe I can see now, just perceiving themselves that way more aggressively than the
Yeah.
other group of people. But it was like always like, I have no basic morality except for the grace of God.
Okay.
And I was like, that's not true. In fact, it felt as though there was this glass pane between me and everyone else that was like this God filter, and that you couldn't love someone or have any kind of moral standard or be really connected or spiritual without going through this glass pane. And
Okay.
these people lived without it, and I found it to be a much more authentic thing. And then there was a video that they played for us that was called Purple State of Mind, that was about a guy who lost his faith in college and a guy who gained his faith in college. And the a guy who lost it was like way more authentic and cool, and like really loved his family and didn't need a faith to do that. And the guy who had gained it was kind of an asshole. And so a lot of it was just like, I had great Christian friends, but it felt like the only thing that was keeping them from being terrible people was their faith, at least in their perception. And I was like, well, I don't want to hang out with a bunch of terrible people who just have this, thing on.
Yeah.
So, and there were other things. I mean, but and at some point, I just felt like I just pushed it out of my heart, because I felt like there was some kind of falsehood that I had to accept, that no longer felt right for me in order to experience God. But I didn't feel like I didn't experience God. I felt like I actually had to push it away, because it came with all these things that didn't feel right,
Yeah.
and it was confusing. And then over time, I, developed other things. But there was definitely some learning about how the Bible was put together, about how Christianity came about the history of it, that I was never taught, right? Like this opening of doors that seemed like they had deliberately been closed for me,
Okay.
or that people didn't believe were true, and came to light. So anyway, yeah, that's what happened to me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I definitely seen a lot of that, like new doors being opened, because I took Intro to Christianity and then Global Christianity, and I'm trying to expand to other religions. But I wanted to take Christianity because I wanted to understand more the history of how the modern church came to be. And there's a lot that I learned that I didn't know about, like how the Bible was put together and how they chose like what books to go and what books didn't. And I definitely understand the idea of like, well, okay, was this like actually what's it, like the inspired word of God? I can see why people would think that. I still believe it was.
Mhm.
But I definitely understand like the learning about the church history and having that be kind of a in your faith.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, I didn't really struggle with that too much. I don't have too much to add on that.
Mhm.
But it
Mhm.
is interesting
Yeah.
hearing about that. There's a lot of the people view Christianity as the church, but I view Christianity as a personal relationship with God. And I think that the
Mhm.
church can definitely push people away. That's because people are still sinners. People aren't
People.
perfect.
Mhm.
And so it always makes me sad when I hear that like the church pushed someone away, because that's people pushing people away. There was no relationship with God that was, I guess you could say, put into somebody. It's just all these people that messed up push them away. I just find that very sad when that happens.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I would say, just to caveat that a little, like fill it in a little bit more. I think there were a lot of I think I blended my faith with a lot of different rules and requirements for myself that weren't necessarily even what many Christians would believe. And but I've never found my way back to Christianity specifically. It just doesn't resonate anymore at all. Um, so yeah, well, thank you for letting me talk about
Of
that.
course.
Um, uh, yeah, did we have anything else that you wanted to cover?
I think what you just said brings us into the next good question. How do you think that your upbringing like influenced
Mm.
the way that you handled college and the way that you handled like the church you were talking about? How do you think that affected it?
Why don't you start with guessing that for me, since you're hot off
Okay.
the presses of some, you know,
Hmm.
details.
I think that I don't know what church you grew up in. But I'm guessing the church you grew up in was a lot more like regular people. It wasn't one of those churches that like pushes people away where everyone thinks they're up on a pedestal. Um, and I think from what it sounds like when you got to college, it became one of those churches where everyone thinks they're on a pedestal because I have a relationship with God and you don't. I mean, I'm better than you. It's actually not what the Bible says.
Mhm.
But I think that not being exposed to that other side influenced like pushing you away from the church because you got into like the real world and saw this is what it's really like where all these people have this title but they don't actually like follow what it says. um and so I think that not being exposed to that influenced how you ended up handling that in college. Am I right on
Yeah,
that?
I would say not. This would be painful for my parents to hear. Um, I would say not being exposed enough to the world out there had the most implications
Yeah.
for painful things I may have experienced because I was too innocent.
Yep.
And also mainly, I did grow up actually, though, the school that I grew up in was very us versus them. I mean, it was very like, we have found the way kind of a
Okay.
thing. So it was actually that. And I would say almost in some ways in college, it was like less worse in that regard because people had to socialize with people outside of their faith. But it was more the idea of the morality thing that and and yes, so yeah, in a nutshell, yes, I wasn't exposed to the world enough. And what I was exposed to, and I that time in Christianity, I think it was very, very important culturally that you had this purification kind of energy and that you weren't. And now with social media, the way the internet's gone, just the way that culture has
Mm-hmm.
changed in general too. Like at the time, like most people would have thought that being gay was a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't.
Yeah, it was
So
very taboo.
yeah, so there was a lot of yeah. So that's yeah. Let me take a guess at you. Well, assuming now that that would not have been the same environment for you, um, I think, has it prepared you well? It probably has prepared you well for understanding your faith in a new context. I would say, yeah, I'll say again, probably the internet, social media, just being exposed to the world
Mm-hmm.
more, so that when you're developing those core faith beliefs, you have already tested them out against
Mm-hmm.
reality along the way.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but then that's going to sound like I'm saying like, "Oh, you're a success story and I'm going to be a lost child on my way back." And I don't believe that about myself at all. But I would say that, to have a strong belief system in something, it has to be tested and
Yeah.
tested early, and you have to have exposure to the outside.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I have had a very blessed life. I'm very thankful for the life that my parents gave me, like the church I grew up in. But growing up with the internet, I mean, I think I got my iPad when I was 7, 8, something like that. Um, and so I saw a lot of like the news and stuff on TV, or stuff that came up on YouTube, or whatever. That's real stuff going on in the world, and I didn't experience it like firsthand, but I saw it, and it was enough to like solidify the fact that the Bible says that like these things happen. I don't want to be associated with those things. I've seen enough of that close enough when it's on my screen. I don't really want to be involved with that personally. So I'm going to choose to stay with my faith. So I think that seeing um like difficulties then experiencing the hard times that I have personally experienced has helped solidify it because I've gotten enough of an idea of what the other side would be like that I don't want to get involved with that. If that
Oh
makes sense.
yeah, I mean that's so interesting because it's like the opposite of what my exposure was when I met the other side.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, cool.
I mean, it's like in college, it's like, oh, go to a party, go sleep with whoever you want, and like people that grow up under or in the little bubble, like they come out, and I'm not saying you grew up in a bubble,
Mhm,
obviously,
mhm,
but people that do like grow up in their little Christian bubble with their Christian friends, or they always do Bible study, hangouts, blah 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 blah. They get to college and like, well, I want to go try these things that I've
mhm,
never seen. I don't know the implications of this stuff, and
mhm,
those are the people that I think you find generally they fall away from the church. They get involved with alcohol, or they start sleeping around, or they get
mhm.
arrested for doing stuff. I think it's important that like parents that are raising their children, they obviously keep them safe. Like that's what a parent should do.
Mhm.
But it's important that they still let them see the world enough that they know what is out there so they don't aren't tempted to try it. Like
Right.
I'm not tempted to go to parties and to go just sleep with random people.
Mhm.
I've seen enough of that that I know that's not for me. But I don't know about all my friends if they've had that same experience, they've had that same upbringing where they've seen this stuff not first, third hand, maybe I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, that's so interesting because I feel like I totally agree with you. Bubble turns into that Catholic school syndrome, right? Where they go wild later. And I mean, like I said, I definitely had things where I was too innocent for a situation. That if I had learned more about the nuances of,
yeah,
but if I was a mom and I've chosen not to have kids, but if I was raising kids, certainly within my worldview, what I think is most important is not abstinence from those things, but the ability to understand, well, these people are not nice, or overindulging in
hmm,
substances is going to ruin your life, or how to have, like, I feel like it's like this it's like this black and white of either complete puritanism or hedonism seem
hmm,
like the only two options,
yeah,
right? Whereas, like, I've learned as an adult to live a life of temperance, and I always find it interesting that I've seen also Christians who grew up in a bubble, fell away, destroyed their lives because they became the other character in the script they were handed, which is to go be stupid
yeah,
and hedonistic. And they're like, oh, I guess this is what I do when I'm not that.
yeah,
Ruin their lives, then come back to the faith,
yeah. Learn
and
the hard
maybe
way.
even harder than they were before, very, very
Hmm,
strict, because they didn't learn how to have some kind of morals, standards, and temperance of things,
yeah,
along the way. But yeah, so that's very interesting. I can totally see your perspective.
yeah. It's important to for parents to like help their children understand. I mean, there are certain things that are you do it or you don't, like premarital sex. I don't see like a middle there. You either did it or you didn't. Um, and I don't think like something like that is to me you can play around with. But like alcohol, I don't personally view having one or two beers or whatever your drink of choice is as a sin. But obviously, getting completely wasted, I think that is a sin.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's important for parents to instill like expose their kids to like what an alcoholic is, so that like they see it on TV or they talk about somebody that a coworker or whatever that's an alcoholic and how it's destroyed their lives, and let the kids hear this and then come up with their own views on that. Like
Or
my
even potentially somebody who drinks responsibly, as a
exactly,
contrast. Yeah.
exactly. Like I've seen my parents drink responsibly, and I've heard and seen people that don't. And I personally don't plan on drinking alcohol at all. I don't see the benefit to it.
Mhm.
Um, for my mental state, for my health, blah blah blah. I just don't see the purpose. But I don't view a friend that when they turn legal age and they're just chilling at home on a Friday night, they want to have a couple beers. I don't view anything wrong with that.
Mhm.
I think it's important that because of my exposure to alcohol, I am able to have that view. And I think that parents need to give their children that kind of controlled view where they can see it enough to not get directly harmed by it and still form their opinions.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. All right. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think
All
I think we got a
right.
lot.
Well, thank you so much for all the time, and, like, we covered a lot of ground. That
We
was
did,
cool.
yeah. It was
Yeah.
a good time. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah. You're welcome.